Good morning, everyone. We'd like to thank the committee for giving us the opportunity to present the results of the RISAS trial, which was a prospective trial on the accuracy of combining radioactive iodine seed placement in the axilla with sentinel lymph node biopsy in clinically node-positive breast cancer patients treated with neoadjuvant chemotherapy. I'll be presenting on behalf of the RISAS investigators. I have no disclosures. Clinically node-positive breast cancer patients are nowadays often treated with neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And as a result, at least 1/3 of these patients achieves a pathologic complete response of the axilla, also known as PCR. And these patients are not expected to benefit from axillary lymph node dissection. But what is a less invasive alternative to determine treatment response in the axilla without having to remove all the lymph nodes? Well, two things are important here. On the one hand, we want to prevent unnecessary axillary lymph node dissection in patients with a PCR. On the other hand, we want to prevent undertreatment in those patients without a PCR, and therefore we need a procedure that accurately identifies any residual disease. And for a procedure to be able to safely replace axillary lymph node dissection, such a procedure should have a low false negative rate and a high negative predictive value to prevent undertreatment in those patients with residual disease. In a systematic review and meta-analysis by our group, we compared 3 different less invasive alternatives to axillary lymph node dissection and looked at the identification rates and accuracy of these procedures. For sentinel lymph node biopsy, we included 17 trials with approximately 2,000 patients, and we found a rather low overall identification rate and a rather high overall false negative rate. And furthermore, the negative predictive value was 86% at best. Regarding the MARI procedure, in which a radioactive iodine seed is placed in the pathologically proven positive lymph node prior to neoadjuvant chemotherapy, we included 1 trial involving 100 patients, and they reported a high identification rate and a false negative rate of 7%, but the negative predictive value of the MARI procedure is similar to the one of sentinel lymph node biopsy. And this means that in 1 in 6 patients with a negative sentinel lymph node or a negative MARI node, they will in fact have residual disease in the axilla. Regarding targeted axillary dissection, which is based on the concept of combining the former 2 procedures, we included 2 trials. 1 prospective registry study from MD Anderson, including 85 patients, and 1 prospective trial from Spain, including 35 patients. And they found excellent results on all aspects. And furthermore, they reported that in about a quarter of the patients, the marked lymph node was not retrieved as a sentinel lymph node, which demonstrates why it makes sense to combine these 2 procedures. And last month, a 3rd trial was published by a German group, the CENTA trial, a prospective registry study including 77 patients, and they reported similar accuracy results for targeted axillary dissection, but a rather low identification rate of 86%. And although the results are promising for targeted axillary dissection, the evidence to support this procedure is limited, and therefore we set up the RISAS trial, which was a prospective multi-center validation trial in which we included pathologically proven clinically node-positive breast cancer patients treated with neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Patients with positive infra or supraclavicular lymph nodes were not included. And all patients underwent the RISAS procedure followed by axillary lymph node dissection. Prior to neoadjuvant chemotherapy, the radiologist placed a radioactive iodine seed in the pathologically proven positive lymph node under ultrasound guidance. Next, all patients were treated with neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And following neoadjuvant chemotherapy, at the time of surgery, the lymph node containing the iodine seed was removed together with all sentinel lymph nodes, and a completion axillary lymph node dissection was performed. The trial was set up as a non-inferiority trial, and we determined that non-inferiority would be proven if the 95% of the upper bound of the confidence interval of the false negative rate would be below 6.25%. and that equaled a maximum of 4 false negative results in 144 patients with residual disease. Based on an estimated PCR of the axilla of 36% and an estimated dropout rate of 10%, we needed to include 248 patients. And the non-inferiority margin of the false negative rate corresponded to a negative predictive value of 90%. From March 2017 until December 2019, informed consent was provided by 252 patients, of whom 227 patients completed neoadjuvant chemotherapy and underwent the RISAS procedure. And of these 227 patients, the RISAS procedure was successful in 223 patients, meaning that at least one lymph node could be identified with this procedure, accounting for an identification rate of 98%. And of these patients, 79 had a pathologic complete response of the axilla, accounting for a PCR rate of 35.4%. And the remaining patients had residual disease in the axilla. In some patients, axillary lymph node dissection was not performed at the patient's request, and this decision was made prior to surgery and was not based on the outcome of the RISAS procedure. For the final analysis, we only included patients with a PCR in whom also axillary lymph node dissection was performed, and we included all patients with residual disease, whether or not axillary lymph node dissection was performed, since the outcome of the axillary lymph node dissection specimen would not change the true positive status. Regarding the identification rate, we found that in 16% of the patients, either the sentinel lymph node was identified or the marked lymph node was identified. And regarding residual disease, we found that in 19% of the patients, the residual disease was found only in the sentinel lymph node or only in the marked lymph node. And furthermore, the marked lymph node was retrieved as a sentinel lymph node in about 70% of the patients. In total, we found five false negative results, one more than we estimated, and they occurred in 5 different institutions. And the majority of these results occurred within the first 10 included patients of the involved institutions. And the residual disease in the axillary lymph node dissection specimen constituted of micrometastasis in 1 patient and macrometastasis in 1 or 2 nodes in the remaining patients. This resulted in a false negative rate of 3.47% and a negative predictive value of 93.59%, meaning that in 1 in 16 patients with a negative RISAS procedure, residual disease will be missed. And although these results are excellent, non-inferiority was not formally proven since the upper bound of the confidence interval exceeded the non-inferiority margin of 6.24%, which is also demonstrated in this figure. However, as we can see, the false negative rate of the RISAS procedure is really close to the pre-specified false negative rate. Coming back to the table we reported previously in this presentation, we see that the RISAS results confirm the previously reported results for targeted axillary dissection, with an excellent identification rate and a very low chance of missing residual disease. Our take-home message is that the RISAS procedure is associated with a false negative rate of 3.5% and a negative predictive value of 93.6% in a large multi-center trial. And therefore, we conclude that the RISAS procedure or targeted axillary dissection is the most suitable staging procedure for clinically node-positive breast cancer patients treated with neoadjuvant chemotherapy because the chance to miss residual disease is the lowest with this procedure. However, this study was only on the accuracy of targeted axillary dissection, and we are still awaiting the results of ongoing trials that assess the oncologic safety of de-escalation in this era. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.